The neon lights of the bar swirled, a dizzying kaleidoscope of color. I just planted a sloppy, desperate kiss on a complete stranger. And now I was clinging to him, sobbing uncontrollably. "Why don't you like me?" I wailed, my voice thick with alcohol and despair. He didn't answer, just stood there, stoic and unreadable. 2 fat tears rolled down my cheeks. I wasn't letting go. Not this time. The crowd around us started to whoop and cheer, a cacophony of drunken encouragement. Fueled by their energy and my own mortification, I hiccuped. Loudly. Right in his face. Later, Amy, my best friend and roommate, told me she'd used all her strength trying to pull me off him. Apparently, I was a force of nature in my drunken stupor. In the end, it was the victim of my unwanted affection who'd carried me out of the bar, practically depositing me into Amy's arms. Amy, she said, looked like she was about to cry herself. After Amy dragged me back to our shared apartment, I collapsed onto my bed, sinking into a sleep so deep it felt like I'd fallen off the edge of the world. I woke up the next day, sometime around noon, my head pounding, my hair a tangled mess that resembled a bird's nest. Even getting out of bed felt like climbing Mount Everest. The hazy memories started to flood back. 6, maybe 7, bottles of beer. The blurred faces in the bar. And then, him. In the swirling lights, I'd seen him, or at least, I thought I'd seen him, Julian Vance, the lead singer of The Renegades, the object of my unrequited, all-consuming affection. The thought of Julian spurred me into action. I scrambled out of bed, forgetting my slippers, and raced barefoot into the living room, grabbing a bewildered Amy by the shoulders. "Babe," I yelled, my voice still hoarse. "I think I kissed my celebrity crush last night." "Babe," Amy sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. She was in the middle of writing her thesis and looked utterly defeated, slumped on the sofa. Like a deflated balloon. She managed a weak, sympathetic smile. "There was no celebrity crush. You just forcibly kissed a rather attractive stranger." Amy, fueled by caffeine and the sheer horror of witnessing my drunken antics, proceeded to give me a play-by-play of the previous night's events. She recounted, in excruciating detail, how I'd downed 7 bottles of potent liquor, how I'd sobbed on her shoulder, pouring out my undying love for Julian, and finally, how I'd launched myself at the unfortunate stranger, effectively assaulting him with my drunken affection. I wanted to disappear. I felt like digging a hole in the floor and burying myself in it. Then, using the meager dirt I was able to find, constructing a scale replica of Windsor Castle, just to emphasize the depth of my humiliation. Amy called it social suicide. She also told me not to worry. The world was a big place. Chances were I'd never see him again. I believed her. And then, of course, I saw him again. Oh, the irony. I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. It happened on the day Julian officially announced his relationship. Amy was at the city library, buried in research. I was sitting on the carpet, hugging my phone, repeatedly locking and unlocking the screen. On the screen was Julian's latest social media post. The caption read, "This one keeps stealing my headphones." It was accompanied by a picture of 2 hands intertwined. I knew instantly which hand was Julian's. I also knew that I should have liked the post, left a comment offering my congratulations. A somewhat famous band frontman falling for one of his fans. It was a fairy tale, right? But I did nothing. I sat there on the carpet from morning until afternoon, feeling the pain in my stomach grow from a dull ache to a sharp, twisting cramp. Finally, Amy came home and found me in this state. Seeing my distress, she practically shoved me into a taxi and took me to the hospital. In the taxi, I buried my face in my hands, trying to compose myself. Amy, bless her heart, started right in. "Don't try to hold it in," she said. I saw the post too. That was it. The dam broke. I sobbed, producing a truly impressive stream of snotty tears, all over Amy's shoulder. I'd loved Julian since the first time he and his band performed on our university campus. I'd gone from being a listener to a friend, from a friend to one of his closest friends. But that's where it stopped. Friend. Amy rubbed my stomach and dabbed at my tears with tissues. By the time we got out of the taxi, I'd managed to stop crying, though I still clutched my stomach as we walked into the hospital. Luckily, the hospital wasn't too crowded. I didn't have to wait long to see a doctor. He was impeccably dressed in a white coat, a mask covering most of his face, leaving only his bright, intelligent eyes visible. "There are signs of a fever," It's likely appendicitis, and it seems quite severe, the doctor said calmly, gently pressing around my navel. Doctor, can medication fix it? I asked weakly, leaning on Amy for support. If I could avoid surgery, I would. It was my last stand. Let's do an ultrasound first, the doctor said, scribbling something on a form with a flourish. He then gestured for Amy to take me for the scan. I looked at his name tag. It read, simply, Dr. Ethan Shaw. Dr. Shaw, I persisted, a desperate edge to my voice. What if the ultrasound shows something bad? Then we'll operate. Oof. I sucked in a breath. The doctor's voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact, like he'd seen it all before. It made me feel like a piece of meat on a butcher's counter, devoid of feeling. I bit my lip, overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all, and almost burst into tears again. Perhaps it was the way I was clutching Amy's hand, trying to stand up despite my obvious pain, but Dr. Shaw actually reached out to help me. He added, Olivia, right? If you need surgery, I'll be the one performing it. For some reason, even though he said it so plainly, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I looked at the doctor, and a strange feeling of familiarity washed over me. Amy helped me out of the room. I leaned on her shoulder and whispered, Do you think Dr. Shaw is a little weird? He's a little weird, yeah. Weirdly handsome. I'm being serious. So am I. He's definitely handsome. Even with the mask, you can tell by his eyes and eyebrows. He's a total cutie. I took a deep breath, deciding to ignore Amy's commentary. Surviving the ultrasound was my priority. Amy matched her pace to mine, walking slowly through the hospital, the scent of antiseptic heavy in the air. I was focused on walking, but suddenly, Amy stopped dead in her tracks. I bumped into her shoulder and almost fell backward. What are you doing? I know why that doctor seems weird. Amy squeezed my hand, her eyes glued to the staff directory on the wall. I followed her gaze. On the second row, I saw Ethan Shaw's photo and a brief biography. Chief physician, young and promising, not bad-looking, definitely handsome, I muttered, glancing at Ethan's ID photo. So, shouldn't we be going for that ultrasound? I'm a patient standing here, and you, my supposedly loyal friend, are staring at a handsome doctor. If it were just any handsome doctor, I wouldn't be interested. Amy pulled her gaze away from the wall and met my eyes, a sudden spark of intense gossip lighting them up. But if it's the handsome doctor you forcibly kissed, my interest is very much piqued. Oh my God. In a single day, I'd experienced Julian's relationship announcement, a suspected case of acute appendicitis, cried a river of tears, and now Amy was telling me that my future surgeon, Ethan Shaw, was the very same person I'd mistaken for Julian and drunkenly assaulted in a bar. As it turned out, Ethan was a pretty good doctor. He said I had appendicitis, and I did. I was admitted to the hospital. A nurse stuck an 4 in my hand and explained the pre-op procedures. Amy, seeing how utterly miserable and traumatized I was, rushed around, paying my fees, and then went to the cafeteria to get me something to eat. I lay in bed, watching the nurse insert the needle and hang the 4 bag. After a long, awkward silence, I finally ventured, Excuse me, Miss Nightingale, is my attending physician. Dr. Ethan Shaw. The nurse was taken aback, then burst out laughing. She cheerfully told me, Yes, it is. Don't worry, Dr. Shaw is young, but he's very skilled. My skin smiled politely, while my soul was busy building a replica of Howl's moving castle on the floor. You seem nervous, the nurse observed, adjusting the drip rate. Dr. Shaw seems a little off these past few days, but don't worry, he's very professional. Is Dr. Shaw not in a good mood lately? I clutched the blanket, probing further. Yeah, I guess so. I heard he was harassed by some female hooligan the other day. Perhaps because I looked so harmless, the nurse lowered her voice and shared this juicy piece of gossip. The way she said, female hooligan, was so theatrical, it instantly brought back the fragmented memories of me throwing myself at Ethan, begging him to hold me. Damn it. He definitely recognized me. I pulled the blanket over my head like an ostrich, my mind replaying the flashing lights of the bar and Ethan's dark, cool eyes. Some people are alive, but they really don't deserve to exist in society. Amy brought back some porridge, telling me she'd arranged for sick leave and that 2 of my colleagues would be covering my work at the magazine. I mumbled an okay and stared at the steaming porridge for a while before suddenly looking up at Amy. Do you think if I apologize to Dr. Shaw now, he'll forgive me? Apologize? Amy dragged a chair over to my bedside. Olivia, my dear editor, isn't it a little late to apologize 5 days later? And weren't you, at one point, declaring your undying love for him, claiming that heaven and earth could bear witness to your sincerity? For God's sake, those were just lines I'd learned from cheesy historical dramas. And those words, those drunken ramblings, were meant for Julian. About a week ago, I was at home, reviewing 2 important articles for the magazine, when Julian messaged me. He wrote, Olivia, I fell in love at first sight with a girl. He was supposed to be a guest performer with his band at a music festival, but he'd met someone in the volunteer team who'd instantly captured his heart. Julian even sent me a side profile picture of the girl. Short, shoulder-length hair, a delicate nose, cherry-red lips, wearing Bluetooth headphones. A captivating mix of boyish and girlish charm, someone you wouldn't easily forget. Julian said her name was Chloe. Julian also said he was going to pursue her. I was stunned. In my heart, Julian was always a bright, shining star. He could spontaneously decide to backpack for 3 months or cycle alone to Tibet. He could form a band to chase his dreams, or refuse to compromise and break his contract when the company wanted to disband the group and promote him as a solo artist. I loved that passionate, fiery Julian. So, even though I knew he wasn't interested in a girl like me, who lived a predictable, routine life, I was willing to stay by his side as a friend. Over the years, I'd almost convinced myself that we could continue like this forever. But he'd fallen in love at first sight with Chloe, someone who resonated with his soul. Besides offering my blessings, I had no reason, no right, to say anything else. After reading Julian's message, I didn't reply immediately, which was unusual for me. I put down my phone and sat in silence for a long time. Later, I asked Amy what to do when you're sad. Amy said to sleep it off. I asked her what to do if you can't sleep. Amy said, get drunk. And so, a heartbroken girl nursing an unrequited love and a heartbroken girl with a 50% plagiarism score on her thesis went hand in hand to a newly opened bar nearby. But I seriously overestimated my alcohol tolerance. After a few bottles, I didn't even know who I was anymore. In my entire life, the only time I'd ever dared to express my true feelings under the influence of alcohol, I'd mistaken the person. I'd turned into a female hooligan. Thinking about all this, I couldn't help but sigh. Amy scouted the situation, checking on Ethan. She discovered he was incredibly busy. The only time he came into my room was to check on the patient in the next bed. As he was leaving, Ethan instructed Amy to take me for a blood test the next morning. While they were talking, I was curled up in my bed, playing dead. Perhaps my stillness was too bizarre, because Ethan glanced at me, stopped walking, and turned back towards my bed. He asked if I was still in a lot of pain. The sudden concern almost made me choke. I chuckled awkwardly. It's not that bad anymore, thank you, Dr. Shaw. Good. Barring any complications, your surgery is scheduled for the day after tomorrow. I'll be performing it. He was quite close, so I could clearly see him raise an eyebrow when he said the words, performing it. I swallowed hard and said, hee hee. Of course, I trust Dr. Shaw's skills. Just looking at him made me feel so guilty that my speech became stuttering and awkward. I'm glad you trust me. Ethan put his hands in his white coat pockets, his tone light and casual. I was just starting to relax, thinking Ethan was about to leave, when he suddenly bent down and leaned in closer. Ethan had a faint scent of laundry detergent, mixed with the antiseptic smell of the hospital, which made me feel a little dizzy. This time, he was even closer than when he'd helped me up earlier, so close that I could hear his breathing. Don't move. Ethan's voice was slightly husky. He told me not to move, and I, like an idiot, froze on the bed, watching him reach out his hand. His cool fingers brushed my cheek, and then he tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Ethan's fingers felt like they were carrying an electric current, making half my body tingle. This was flirting, blatant flirting. I snapped back to reality and jerked away, avoiding his hand. Am I that scary? Ethan straightened up and looked at me innocently. His hand was still suspended in the air, his thumb and forefinger holding a small, white object. Was that a grain of rice stuck in my hair? Amy, who'd been silently observing the whole scene, was shaking with suppressed laughter. I looked at the grain of rice on Ethan's fingertip, my mouth and eyes twitching uncontrollably. It's just social suicide, I thought. Die a few more times, and you'll get used to it. No, you're not scary. I was being inappropriate. Thank you, Dr. Shaw. I'm glad I'm not scary. Ethan threw the grain of rice into the trash can. He then added, my stitching technique is pretty good, and since we're old acquaintances, I'll do my best to make the scar look nice. Old acquaintances, I'd like to thank you for that. How could such a clear, pleasant voice say such murderous, heart-wrenching words? I forced a smile that was probably more painful to look at than a grimace. Ethan gently patted my shoulder. If I wasn't mistaken, he was smiling too. Even though the mask covered most of his face, the irrepressible amusement was evident in his eyes. I felt like a pet, trapped in his territory, struggling and flailing, but ultimately at his mercy. My attending physician had a grudge against me. But I couldn't blame him, because I was the one who'd violated him. After I was admitted, Amy stayed with me as my bedside companion. Ever since I graduated and started renting an apartment, Amy had been my roommate. Over the years, we'd supported each other, dragged each other down, and formed a bond of friendship as strong as any pair of mischievous, inseparable friends could have. While I lay in bed, Amy worked on her thesis. Before I went into the operating room, she sat on a chair in the hallway outside, still working on her thesis. When I woke up from the anesthesia, she finally put down her computer and leaned over, asking how I felt. Okay, I guess. Maybe it was the lingering effects of the anesthetic, but I'd slept so soundly that I didn't feel much pain when I woke up. I actually wanted to see if Ethan had stitched my incision nicely. If it doesn't hurt, then you should get ready. Get ready for what? Julian just called. He heard you took sick leave and asked me which hospital you were in. He's on his way to see you. What? I raised my head, staring at Amy with wide eyes. Amy shrugged, indicating that I was on my own. My incision didn't hurt much. It was my heart that was aching. Julian arrived quickly. Before I could even process my emotions, he walked into my room, carrying a fruit basket in one hand and holding his girlfriend's hand in the other. What a lovely surprise. I forced a smile and politely invited them to sit down. Julian awkwardly introduced Chloe and me to each other. I looked at Chloe, and she was looking at me too. Our eyes met, both of us wearing smiles that weren't entirely sincere. I heard that the pain after an appendectomy can be quite severe. Is Miss Olivia's body doing okay? Chloe's voice was crisp and clear, like a flowing stream. Olivia will be fine. Didn't I tell you? She's like a real-life Doryman. She'll be all right, Julian answered for me, chuckling. He then looked at me and asked, right, Liv? It doesn't really hurt. The muscles in my face were starting to ache from smiling so much, I didn't even have the energy to worry about the pain from the incision. Julian sat beside my bed, chatting and laughing, telling me that his band was starting to work on new songs. As he spoke, Julian pulled out his phone and leaned close to me, showing me the lyrics and melodies of the new songs, completely oblivious to any need for discretion. Julian told Chloe that I was his most loyal listener, that I'd followed every song since university, and that I knew the lyrics and melodies better than he did. Julian thought this was a sign of our brohood. Whether Chloe felt the same way, I was too embarrassed to even guess. I subtly shifted my body, trying to create some distance between Julian and me, but I accidentally pulled on the incision, which was starting to throb as the anesthetic wore off. I winced in pain and glanced at Amy, silently begging for help. Amy frowned, her expression conveying her helplessness. When I tried to catch her eye again, she simply slipped out of the room. Damn it. Julian was still rambling on about the inspiration behind his new songs. I stole a glance at Chloe and caught her scrutinizing gaze. Our eyes met. She smiled faintly and then started fiddling with her headphones. I couldn't hear a word Julian was saying. I just wanted him to finish, but unfortunately, he had 3 or 4 new songs, and just explaining the creative process could take half an hour. So, I took a deep breath and interrupted him. Julian, I'm still a patient. Huh? What's wrong? Julian put down his phone and asked, did I touch your incision? No. What I mean is, patients generally need to rest. That was as much of a hint as I could give. Please, don't be so dense. Julian looked confused, pausing for a long moment without reacting. This was the first time I'd ever interrupted him when he was talking about his music. Seeing Julian's stunned expression, I pursed my lips and didn't say anything more. Excuse me, sir, could you please step aside? It was Ethan's sudden appearance that broke the silence between the three of us. Wearing his white coat and name tag, Ethan had an undeniable authority in the hospital room. As soon as he spoke, Julian and Chloe both stood up to make way for him. Dr. Shaw. I felt like I'd seen a savior. I forgot all about my previous indiscretion with Ethan. Right now, he was a godsend, a halo practically glowing above his head. Ethan walked past the others, bent down at the head of my bed, and felt my forehead. Finding my temperature normal, he withdrew his hand. I was quite busy today and only just found time to check on you. You don't blame me, do you? I couldn't help but give him the classic, old man looking at a phone expression. Ethan, who I thought had a grudge against me, had not only suddenly appeared, but he'd also so intimately come to my rescue, and even subtly hinted at my visitors to leave. Olivia just had surgery and needs rest. If you're finished visiting, I suggest you leave. Unassuming, yet with a hidden edge. Ethan and Julian were about the same height, but with the added authority of the white coat, he seemed to tower over Julian. Olivia? Julian's expression froze. His gaze shifted between Ethan and me, finally settling on me. So, you two were close? I guess you could say that. In a certain sense, Ethan and I were indeed quite close. If kissing and embracing can define a relationship, then I suppose I'm Olivia's boyfriend. Ethan, with his back to me, answered for me. Snap. The halo above Ethan's head, in my mind, shattered. After Ethan's subtle suggestion, Julian and Chloe left. Before leaving, Julian asked me, with a hint of disbelief, Olivia, are you really dating someone? Under Chloe's silent scrutiny, I was so embarrassed that my face flushed. I closed my mouth and didn't answer, effectively confirming his suspicion. Ethan seemed to have rescued me, but he'd also seemed to set an even bigger trap for me. As he tucked the blanket around me, I looked at the stray lock of hair on his forehead and couldn't help but say, Dr. Shaw, thank you for helping me out, but was I wrong? Ethan interrupted me before I could finish. Do you think you were, right? You did kiss me, hug me, and cause me to be teased by my colleagues for days. It was my fault. I was to blame. It was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry. I apologized sincerely, my heart filled with remorse. An apology isn't necessary, but I've been thinking about it for days, and I can't figure out why you didn't call me. Did you want to kiss me and then pretend it never happened? Call? What call? The hospital's number. I was completely baffled. Didn't you check your pockets after you got back from the bar? Ethan paused, then chuckled. His question made me even more confused. No, I didn't. I'd shoved all my clothes into the washing machine. They were probably hanging on the balcony, swaying in the wind. Ethan seemed like he wanted to say something else, but a nurse called his name from the doorway, sounding urgent. Ethan quickly responded and turned back to me, saying, I really am busy today. So, Olivia, get some rest. I'll come back to see you when I'm free. Ethan left before I could finish speaking. I watched Ethan's retreating figure and mumbled, confused, Hey, how did you know I'm an editor? The way Ethan was acting so familiar, it was like the anesthetic had been injected straight into his brain, making him so inexplicably attentive to me. Amy had been completely shocked by Julian showing up with Chloe. Seeing how awkward I was, she'd slipped out to find a doctor to rescue me. Who knew that the Ethan she'd found would unleash such a barrage of suggestive remarks, essentially labeling me, a woman who'd never been in a relationship, as his girlfriend. Even the patient in the next bed came over to ask me about the benefits package for doctors at this hospital, saying that as a doctor's family member, I must know the inside scoop. After I recounted everything to Amy, she abandoned her thesis, a look of pure, unadulterated gossip on her face. She'd sked several times and said that Ethan might actually be in love with me at first sight. Impossible, I denied vehemently. Who would fall in love at first sight with a female hooligan who throws herself at them in a bar? At most, Ethan probably just wanted to get back at me for harassing him. I was so adamant in my denial that Amy didn't press the issue. Instead, she asked, what about Julian? He's already in a relationship, but the way he acts around you, he doesn't seem to care about boundaries at all. I remembered Chloe's gaze earlier and suddenly felt speechless. Chloe clearly saw me as a potential threat. Julian was being his usual oblivious self, and if I didn't start being more careful, it would be a complete disaster. Hey, what are you thinking about? Amy waved her hand in front of my face. You're still not over Julian, are you? It's not that easy to get over someone, I sighed, a bitter smile on my face. I'll just avoid him for now. Stay away, and slowly, I think I'll fade away. I suddenly felt a little grateful that I'd mistaken the person I'd confessed to that night. If I'd actually confessed to Julian, who was still pursuing Chloe at the time, the three of us would have become a real-life soap opera. Amy sighed too, telling me that heartbreak was hard to heal and that I should focus on recovering from my surgery. I nodded in agreement, suddenly remembering what Ethan had said earlier. I quickly asked Amy, "Did you tell Ethan that I'm an editor?" "No. Why would I? What's that about?" She hadn't told him. So how did he know? The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I decided to stop thinking about it. Like Amy said, I should focus on healing my broken heart. But Amy and I were both wrong. Heartbreak wasn't the most painful thing. The most painful thing was the surgical incision, especially after the anesthetic wore off. Even though I'd been given painkillers, it still hurt so much that my face was contorted in agony. Amy held my hand and told me to squeeze tighter, that it would pass. "I can't squeeze any harder. I'm not giving birth. But you have to hold on." Amy freed one hand and opened her phone, scrolling through it. Wait a minute, I searched on the internet, and everyone says the pain after an appendectomy is bearable. Well, I felt like I was dying. Everyone has a different pain threshold. She feels pain because her pain threshold is too low. Ethan really did come back to see me. He must have been off duty, because he'd taken off his white coat. Hearing Amy's words, he approached my bed and explained. Ethan was already young, and without the white coat, dressed in casual clothes, he looked even younger, like a fresh-faced college student. He didn't hesitate, he simply pulled up a chair and sat down, comforting me. "Just bear with it a little longer. The painkiller will start working soon." Amy's gaze flitted between Ethan and me. Finally, she surprisingly let go of my hand, making space for Ethan. I glared at Amy, but Ethan gave her an innocent smile. "You must be tired too. Why don't you go home and rest? I'll look after her for now." Amy had absolutely no resistance to handsome men's suggestions, especially a handsome man who promised prime gossip material. So, Amy quickly grabbed her bag, waved goodbye to me, and said she'd come back to keep me company later that night, before slipping out. I didn't even have time to stop her. Ethan and I looked at each other. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to close my eyes and play dead. But I'd barely closed my eyes when I felt a coolness on my lips. I opened my eyes to see Ethan holding a cotton swab dipped in water, dabbing it on my lips. "It's best not to drink water for 24 hours after surgery, so we can only moisten your lips with water to prevent them from cracking." Thank you, I said, feeling awkward, and licked my lips. Ethan tidied up the things on the bedside table and gave me a knowing smile. His smile made me instinctively want to cover where my appendix used to be, but I suddenly remembered that I was now a person without an appendix. A wave of sadness washed over me, and surprisingly, the pain didn't seem as bad anymore. In this awkward atmosphere, I pretended to be casual and asked Ethan how he knew I was an editor. "We met recently." "Recently?" I tried to think back, but besides the bar, I had no other recollection. "A while ago, the magazine you work for did a feature on my cousin. I drove her there. You were there that day." The only feature I'd attended recently was the one on Jasmine Shaw. "You're Jasmine Shaw's cousin?" I exclaimed, then, at his urgent gesture, realized I was in a hospital and quickly lowered my voice. Ethan nodded. I was floored. Jasmine Shaw was a recently popular travel blogger who'd gained a huge following in just a month with her unconventional, bold style and creatively colorful travel photos. Around that time, the magazine I edited was planning a new column, and we'd invited Jasmine for an interview. Normally, I wouldn't have needed to attend such an interview, but I really admired Jasmine's style, and I happened to have nothing else scheduled that day, so I went along with my colleagues. That day, Jasmine, with her confidently vibrant orange hair, was eloquently sharing her experiences. I stood not far away, watching her through the floor-to-ceiling window. I also ended up having a very engaging conversation with another person. That person was wearing a mask, had bright blue hair, and was dressed in a style that was strikingly similar to Jasmine's. After learning that he was a member of Jasmine's team, I started chatting with him about Jasmine. We found we had a lot in common, and our conversation ranged from travel to sculpture, from fitness to cooking. When the interview ended, we parted ways in a hurry, forgetting to exchange contact information. Later, I even praised Jasmine to others, saying she was really something and that even her staff were incredibly insightful. I looked at the clean-cut, bright Ethan in front of me, and then thought back to that day, and that person's eye-catching blue hair. It wasn't exactly the same, to say the least. You weren't the person I was talking to that day, were you? Yes, it was me. But your hair. I remember, not long ago, it wasn't this color. Not long ago, his head was a vibrant shade of blue. Ahem. Ethan coughed, paused, and then explained. Jasmine thought I was too conventional, and she was afraid I'd embarrass her, so she made me wear a wig. So Ethan had his own embarrassing moments too. I couldn't help but let out a chuckle. I was forced to. It was my mom. She insisted I take Jasmine. Ethan's feeble explanation was useless, but I still managed to suppress my laughter. Since I'd been admitted to the hospital, this was the first time I'd had such a calm, normal conversation with Ethan. It wasn't until Amy returned, having packed her things, that I realized Ethan had been with me for over 3 hours. Amy was back, and Ethan didn't overstay his welcome. He stood up to leave, but before he did, he took out a few tubes of ointment from his pocket and placed them on the table. This is for scar removal. It's very effective. You'll probably need it later. Thank you, I replied, giving him a grateful smile. Amy leaned against the wall, watching the strangely harmonious atmosphere that had suddenly developed between Ethan and me. With a look of disbelief, she watched Ethan leave, then turned to me and said, "You two are crazy?" If I didn't explain things clearly, Amy, with her insatiable appetite for gossip, would be the one going crazy tonight. So I patted the edge of the bed, inviting her to sit down so I could explain everything. Amy obediently sat down, her eager expression making it seem like she was already holding a bucket of popcorn. But before I could even get halfway through my explanation, Ethan, who'd just left, rushed back in, stopping abruptly at the doorway. The three of us looked at each other, none of us quite understanding what the others were doing. Ethan stood at the door, staring into my eyes. Suddenly, as if he'd made up his mind, he said, "Your appendix was sent for a routine pathology exam." Oh, okay. I nodded, not understanding. The weather is nice today. It is. But what did that have to do with me, who'd been lying in bed all day? The moonlight is beautiful tonight too. My mind suddenly went numb. Such stuttering, incoherent, fragmented words could only be followed by either a confession or a demand for repayment. So what did Ethan want? Ethan and I were at a stalemate. Finally, Amy, unable to stand it any longer, asked for me, "Dr. Shaw. What exactly are you trying to say?" Amy's question was direct. I saw Ethan's Adam's apple bob. He looked at me and said, I actually have a rather presumptuous request. Ethan's eyes were filled with anticipation and sincerity. Your appendix was perforated, and it has a very unique shape. I think it has some scientific value. If the routine pathology comes back clear, could I use it to make a specimen to be cryopreserved in the hospital's biobank? Feel free. Great. Then I'll see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Goodbye and good riddance. I spent a week in the hospital, and during that time, Ethan and I maintained a tacit agreement not to mention the incident at the bar. After I was discharged, I returned to my hectic life as a corporate drone. Since that encounter at the hospital with Julian, our conversations had dwindled to almost nothing. I'd occasionally see his posts on social media, but I'd quickly scroll past, afraid to linger. I was terrified that the embers of my affection for him, which I'd painstakingly managed to dampen, would reignite. Compared to my interactions with Julian, my conversations with Ethan had noticeably increased. Ethan's work wasn't easy either, and his home was quite far from my apartment. Since I left the hospital, I'd only seen him twice in person. He occasionally sent me strange and wonderful things via same-day delivery, oddly shaped sculptures, porcelain pieces, and even some specimens of flowers and plants that he'd made himself. This calm, uneventful period lasted for about 10 days, until it was shattered by an invitation from Julian to a music festival. The stage was his domain. Julian said he was the opening act for the festival and that I absolutely had to be there. I stared at the word absolutely for a long time, then replied that I couldn't get tickets. I wanted to politely decline, but he sent me 2 tickets, adding that I should bring my boyfriend along at the beginning of next month, and that not going would be a slap in the face to our long-standing friendship. What a mess. I told Amy about it, hugging her waist and begging her to go to the music festival with me. No way, those tickets are for your boyfriend, and I'm really not interested in that kind of music festival, Amy said, munching loudly on potato chips. Why don't you just ask Dr. Shaw to go with you? Human joy and sorrow are not interconnected. Amy only cared about the drama. Amy was convinced that Ethan and I had some sort of unspoken, ambiguous relationship. We wrestled on the sofa, and then I heard my phone ring. I picked it up, and it was Ethan calling. Under Amy's knowing gaze, I answered the phone. Ethan asked if I was free to have dinner with him tomorrow. His voice sounded low, and more than that, tired. I could hear how quiet it was on his end of the line. It didn't sound like he was at the hospital or driving. What's wrong? Where are you? I asked. I'm in my car, about to drive home, Ethan said with a wry laugh. It's nothing major, just got slapped by a patient's family member today. What? You got hit? I raised my voice, startling Amy, who was sitting next to me. It's okay, just a minor injury. But since I'm injured, would editor Olivia do me the honor of letting me treat her to dinner tomorrow? Ethan was remarkably calm, even able to joke about it. No way, you're hurt. I should be treating you to dinner. You pick the place, I'll pay. I was furious about what had happened. After I hung up, I saw Amy staring at me with a look of awe. Wow, you're paying? So bossy. I nudged Amy with my elbow, telling her to act normal. Then, I bent down and took out the scar removal cream Ethan had given me from the drawer under the coffee table. I'd been so busy these past few days that I'd completely forgotten about applying the cream. When I finally remembered and opened one of the boxes, I found a small note tucked inside. The handwriting on the note was neat and elegant, highlighting the important instructions and precautions for using the cream. Oh my God. Dr. Shaw wrote this? Amy leaned in to look, then quickly opened another box. Inside, there was an identical note. Seriously? He was worried you wouldn't read the instructions, so he wrote out the key points for you by hand. I had, in fact, almost opened the box and applied the cream directly, completely forgetting to read the instructions. It seemed like a lot of effort for just some scar cream. But Ethan had put in that effort. That night, I fell asleep to Amy's constant murmurs of, I'm shipping them so hard. The next day, after work, I went to the restaurant Ethan had chosen, using the location he'd sent me. He'd reserved a table by the window. As soon as I sat down, I saw the scratches on his right cheek. 3 distinct scratches, starkly visible on his face, a testament to the force of the slap. How could someone do that? It's never okay to physically assault a doctor, I said, looking at Ethan's injury, unable to contain my outrage. The family was anxious, and there was a communication breakdown. But it's okay, it's a minor injury. I'd never seen Ethan get angry. He seemed to have an endless capacity for tolerance. But doctors are human too. There's no justification for being assaulted while trying to save lives. My sympathy for Ethan transformed into a desire to spend money. I ordered a huge amount of food, ostensibly to help him recover. Ethan seemed uncomfortable with me treating him, so he offered to drive me home, even walking me to my apartment door and seeing me into the elevator. I hesitated, then asked if he wanted to come in for a bit. It wasn't that I was being stingy and didn't want him to come in, but my apartment, which I shared with Amy, was an absolute disaster. No, it's not appropriate for me to go in since you share the apartment. Ethan shook his head with a smile. I took out my keys, intending to open the door. Just as the key was about to go into the lock, Ethan suddenly grabbed my arm. I lost my balance and almost fell into his arms. What is it? My back was against the wall. I was startled by Ethan's sudden movement. I saw a milk tea shop downstairs just now. There's a banner saying there's a 30% discount if you buy 2 cups. Do you want some? No, I'm pretty full from dinner. Your door is nice. Another string of nonsensical phrases. Without Amy around, I had to ask myself. So, I clutched the strap of my bag and asked, you don't want to use my organs for another specimen, do you? My other organs are perfectly healthy, and I wanted to ask if you'd be my girlfriend. If you don't agree, I can keep pursuing you. Keep pursuing? My brain felt like a jammed cassette tape. You mean you've been pursuing me all this time? Was it not obvious? Ethan looked even more surprised than I was. Actually, after we first met and parted ways, I wanted to find you. I asked Jasmine, and she said she'd heard rumors about you and Julian. I thought you were already together, so I didn't want to bother you. What happened later, I think, was fate. Later, I'd made a fool of myself at the bar, throwing myself at him. Julian had announced his official girlfriend. And I'd fallen into Ethan's hands again. Seeing that I hadn't spoken, Ethan continued, "Before you, the only thing that attracted me in this world was medicine. I can't deny that I'm drawn to you. I'm not very good at talking to people, but with you, I always have so much to say. This attraction started from the first time we met and has continued until now. And I have a feeling it will only grow stronger until my heart stops beating." I stared into Ethan's eyes for a long time, trying to determine if he was drunk. But his gaze was clear, with no sign of intoxication. My reason told me I should refuse, but my ability to speak seemed to have suddenly deserted me. I couldn't utter a single word. A click sounded, and the closed apartment door suddenly opened. Amy emerged, carrying a bag of trash. She turned her head and saw me leaning against the wall, with Ethan standing in front of me, his shadow completely enveloping me. I saw Amy's eyes widen, then her mouth open. Just as she was about to shout, I lunged forward and covered her mouth, forcibly stopping the words, I shipped them so hard, from escaping. I grabbed Amy's arm with one hand and covered her mouth with the other, dragging her back inside. Amy and I were tangled together, my mind a complete mess, utterly clueless about how to respond to Ethan. In the end, it was Ethan who gave me an out, telling me I didn't need to give him an answer right away, that he had time to wait until I'd thought it through. I nodded dumbly. Ethan said goodbye, not forgetting to take the bag of trash from Amy's hand. After the door closed, Amy finally managed to pry my hand away from her mouth, taking a deep breath and yelling at me. You ship us, I said, putting my bag on the shoe rack and cutting Amy off. That's what you were going to say, right? No, I was actually going to say, I ship you guys for real. When it came to verbal artistry, Amy never disappointed. Amidst Amy's enthusiastic questioning, I covered my ears with my hands and fled back to my bedroom. I told Amy I was tired and needed to sleep on it. Amy told me that being tired was one thing, but matters of the heart needed to be addressed. So, she followed me into my bedroom and crawled under the covers with me. Actually, I wasn't tired. I was just stuffed, my stomach full and my mind racing, unable to sleep. Amy wasn't tired either. She excitedly asked me what was going on. Ethan suddenly confessed to me. Wow, and what do you think? Amy snuggled closer, wrapping her arms around my waist. I didn't know how to answer him, so I played ostrich. You didn't refuse, so you must have some feelings for him, right? I think you two are a good match. Look, when you used to talk to Julian, you only talked about music and bands, you always went along with whatever he said. But you and Dr. Shaw have so much to talk about, you have so many topics in common. The saying, a bystander sees the game more clearly than the players, might actually have some truth to it. I might actually have fallen for Ethan a little, but I also might not have completely gotten over Julian. So, I was confused. Under Amy's eager gaze, I ruffled her hair and told her there was chocolate in my bag, that I'd bought it especially for her. Her eyes lit up and she left my bedroom, closing the door behind her, telling me to get a good night's sleep. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, then took out my phone, wanting to send Ethan a message. I wanted to tell him that I couldn't accept his confession because I still had someone else in my heart. It wouldn't be fair. But Ethan seemed to be one step ahead of me. Just as I opened my phone, I saw a message from him. Olivia, I have to go out of town for a 2-week exchange program. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm worried that the distance will make our relationship fade, and I'm also worried that you'll meet someone else who attracts you during this time, and I haven't had a chance to tell you how I feel. To avoid missing my chance with you, I chose to confess impulsively. If I scared you, I'm sorry. I read this message several times, deleting and rewriting my reply in the message box many times. Even when Ethan sent a message saying he'd arrived home, I still hadn't managed to type out a complete sentence. Don't make decisions late at night. Late night is for sleeping. If you must make a decision, please wait until I get back to tell me. Good night. Ethan had given me layer upon layer of outs. I sat on the steps he'd provided and replied with a good night. The next day, Ethan left with his colleagues. At noon, while I was having lunch at a convenience store downstairs from my office, I received a photo from him. The photo was taken on the plane, showing thick, layered clouds. Ethan said he'd just landed and was on his way to the hotel. I picked up my phone, took a picture of my bento box, and sent it to him. I received a thank you from Ethan in return. What are you thanking me for? Thank you for sharing your life with me. After reading the message, I put down my chopsticks and rubbed my face vigorously. My face was inexplicably burning because of Ethan's words. This was a real eye-opener. On the 4th day of Ethan's absence, I received a large package. At first, I thought it was from Ethan, but when I opened it, I discovered it was a bass guitar I'd custom ordered. The bassist of Julian's band, Quinn Miller, was his college roommate. I'd known Quinn for as long as I'd known Julian. His birthday was in 2 days, and I'd ordered this bass a long time ago, but I'd completely forgotten about it recently. I took a picture of the bass and sent it to Quinn, intending to have it delivered to him via same-day courier. Quinn replied immediately, telling me he'd already booked a place, and that not only the gift, but also I had to be there. I knew Quinn's personality. If I didn't go, he'd ride his little scooter over and drag me there himself. So, on Quinn's birthday, I lugged the bass to the place he'd booked. It was an outdoor barbecue restaurant. Quinn had booked the entire place. Everyone from the band was there, some with their partners, and someone had even brought their cat. But Chloe wasn't there. I blended into the crowd, grilling meat, keeping a considerable distance from Julian. Quinn was next to me, sprinkling chili powder on the meat. He quietly asked me if I knew what was going on between Julian and Chloe. I looked at Quinn, a little confused, and asked him what was wrong. "You don't know either?" Quinn looked at me in surprise. "They've been in a cold war for days. I was hoping you'd know the reason." I really hadn't been paying much attention to Julian lately. It wasn't my place to interfere in their relationship. Although I'd been intentionally avoiding Julian, with Quinn being such a cheerful presence, the whole night wasn't awkward. But when the party was over, Julian unexpectedly offered to drive me home. "It's okay, I can take a taxi." This was probably the longest sentence I'd spoken to Julian all night. "Didn't that doctor come to pick you up?" "He's out of town." Julian's hands were in his pockets. He asked a question, I answered. The evening breeze made the atmosphere chilly. "You seem to have been avoiding me lately." "Why?" "We're all adults, we're busy with work and life. It's not unusual to not have time to maintain social connections," I said, adjusting my hair uncomfortably. I was used to seeing Julian being so carefree, and seeing him so serious now was a little unsettling. "But I remember we used to have fun chatting, didn't we?" Julian's persistent attitude made me take a step back. It was fun, of course it was fun. In the past, no matter what Julian sent me, I'd make time to reply thoughtfully. I'd listened to all the music he liked. I'd followed all the singers he admired. How could he not have fun chatting like that? But I'd recently realized that I was a very ordinary person. Some of the avant-garde music Julian sent me, I simply didn't understand. Not understanding and having to pretend to understand, it was tiring sometimes. Maybe it's because I'm not that into music lately. I've become interested in other things, like sculpture and specimens, I said, holding my bag tightly and giving Julian an apologetic smile. "I should go home now. Bye." I turned my back to Julian and walked towards the roadside, about to hail a taxi, when I heard Julian say, "Chloe and I broke up." "What?" I turned around in surprise. Julian was still standing there, and it didn't seem like a joke. "She's very individualistic, very special. But she and I are better off as friends, not as a couple." "So, we broke up amicably," Julian said, shrugging. He added that he'd only told me about it so far. Seeing Julian standing there, hesitant, announcing his breakup, my first reaction was actually that Amy would love this gossip. "I hope you find someone who's right for you." "Goodbye," I said, offering him a few hasty words of comfort before getting into the taxi. In the back seat of the taxi, I took out my phone and sent a message to Ethan, telling him the party was over. Less than half a minute later, he called. I answered the phone, and I heard his steady voice. "Don't hang up. It's not safe for you to ride alone at night. Hang up when you get home." "Okay." Ethan chatted with me casually. I looked out the window at the bustling night scene and suddenly remembered Chloe's face, a mix of stubbornness and tenderness. I'd only met her once. I thought that would be the last time, but a few days later, I saw her at my company. Chloe was also surprised to see me, but she greeted me and told me she was there for an interview to be a magazine model. After Chloe's interview, it was my lunch break. I ran into her in the elevator. We smiled at each other, and she initiated a conversation, asking how my recovery was going. "Pretty good." Chloe nodded, then said, "Julian and I broke up." I heard. Chloe didn't seem sad. It seemed like the breakup hadn't affected her much. After I left the company building with Chloe, she suddenly invited me to a nearby dessert shop. I watched Chloe order a bunch of signature cakes and couldn't help but ask if she was worried about gaining weight, since it's almost a rule that models look heavier on camera. It's okay to indulge occasionally, as long as I work out hard afterwards, Chloe said, handing me a piece of cake. This is this shop's signature dessert. Try it. Seeing Chloe's genuine smile, I took the cake, but only ate a couple of bites before putting it down. Seeing Chloe's confused expression, I explained that I gained weight easily and didn't like exercising, so I had to watch what I ate. I think girls with baby faces like you look cute even if they're a little chubby. And you're already very slim, Chloe said, taking a big bite of cake. Then, she added with a smile, no wonder Julian likes you. You look really sweet and agreeable. Likes me? My heart skipped a beat. After I got together with him, I was pretty happy at first. But after we visited you at the hospital, he started obsessively checking your Weibo, your social media, and he always talked about the two of you, about your past. After a while, he felt I was too flighty, and I felt like his heart wasn't with me anymore, so we broke up. Chloe saw my stunned expression and gently tapped the table with her fork to bring me back to reality. I pondered for a moment, then told Chloe that if I was the reason for their breakup, I was sorry. It's not your fault. Both of us have personalities where we're not willing to compromise. After a while, all sorts of problems started to surface. Actually, at first, I was hostile towards you too. But now I think about it, if anyone's to blame, it's Julian for not appreciating what he had until you started dating someone else, and then he regretted it. In Chloe's eyes, I was the one who was best suited for Julian. Two people with strong personalities weren't compatible, and I could tolerate Julian. I watched Chloe finish her cake, then she smiled and said goodbye, telling me she had a photo shoot scheduled for the afternoon and had to leave. Julian doesn't like me, I finally said to her as she was getting up. What? He likes a mold. A mold that could create his best friend, his most loyal audience, his most attentive listener. At the beginning, when love was intoxicating, everything seemed good. Julian liked the unconventional Chloe. But after two people who were unwilling to compromise had exhausted their passion in their daily lives, Julian remembered me, the person who'd tried to fit myself into the mold he liked, in order to chase after him. Chloe paused, then gave a bright smile. Then I wish you and your doctor boyfriend happiness and a long life together. By the way, I've already paid the bill. Their cake is really good, it has filling inside. Chloe pointed to the cake in front of me, then turned and left the dessert shop. Through the large floor-to-ceiling window, I watched Chloe's carefree figure walk away. When she was completely out of sight, I picked up the fork again and took a big bite of the cake. Chloe was right, it did have filling inside. The cake was delicious. I ate the entire cake, then sent a message to Ethan, telling him I'd eaten a huge, high-calorie dessert today. Ethan replied that since I liked it, he'd take me there to eat it again when he got back. Aren't you afraid I'll become a big fatty? You know, I'm a doctor. As long as you're healthy and happy, that's all that matters. I closed my phone, sat in the corner of the dessert shop, covered my face with my hands, and suddenly felt like crying. On the day Ethan returned, I went to the airport. In the bustling crowd, I immediately spotted Ethan, dragging his suitcase and walking out with his colleagues. I called his name and waved my hand. Ethan saw me too, and he walked towards me quickly. Why did you come? Just as Ethan asked this question, I rushed forward and gave him a bear hug, saying muffledly to pick up my boyfriend. Ethan was firmly held in my arms. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling his body gradually relax from its initial stiffness. Then, he hugged me back. Ethan's arms encircled my waist. With a gentle lift, he picked me up, my feet momentarily leaving the ground. Around us were Ethan's colleagues, some cheering, some looking stunned. I patted Ethan's arm, telling him to put me down. After Ethan put me down, I stood half a step behind him, watching him smile so widely that his eyes crinkled. He introduced me to his colleagues as his girlfriend. My hand was clasped in Ethan's. His palm was warm and reassuring. I'd never felt so at peace. This time, Amy could finally shout out, I shipped them for real, without any reservations. A person who'd never been in a relationship before falling in love was. Well, it meant that even seeing a line of ants on the roadside made me want to take a picture and send it to Ethan. So, I opened my phone and told Ethan I'd seen a line of ants moving house. When I checked my messages during my lunch break, Ethan had already sent another photo, telling me he'd seen a cloud today that looked like an appendix. Was he ever going to let this go? I zoomed in on the photo, and the cloud really did look a bit like my appendix turned specimen. I sighed, lamenting that the romance of a STEM-minded straight man was often so simple, straightforward, and infuriating. Julian was like a photograph without lamination. As time passed, his imprint on my life faded. It wasn't until Quinn mentioned that the music festival was about to start that I suddenly remembered Julian's invitation. This time, not only Julian had invited me, but Quinn was also insisting that I go. Quinn said that the day after the music festival was the 7th anniversary of their band's formation. Over the years, most of the people they'd known had come and gone. He hoped I could be there, and Julian hoped I could be there too. The day after the music festival would also be the 7th anniversary of me meeting Julian. While we were taking a walk, I told Ethan about this. Ethan patted my head, checked his schedule, and then told me to give him one of the tickets. I have surgery scheduled that day, but I should be able to make it after work. You go ahead and I'll find you there. You don't mind? I glanced at Ethan surreptitiously. 7 years, whether it's for friendship or for something else, it's worth going. Besides, I'll be with you. Ethan was so open about it. In his eyes, my feelings for Julian, too, deserved to be let go of openly. I stopped walking, hugged Ethan's head, stood on tiptoe, and planted a big kiss on his forehead. With a loud smack, Ethan's ears turned red. No way, I teased, letting go of him. Some people look so cool and detached, but they blush just from a kiss on the forehead. Isn't a mouth just another human organ to you doctors? Do you want to get a drink? Huh? Why drink? When you're not drunk, you seem to only kiss my forehead. The music festival was on, and I went as planned. Since that nighttime goodbye, Julian and I hadn't seen each other. He was busy preparing for his performance. I was intentionally distancing myself. Our chat history stopped a long time ago, never to move again. The 2-day music festival was packed with people, shoulder to shoulder. I followed the flow of the crowd, walking and stopping, finally settling in the back. Everyone was pushing forward. I stood on tiptoe and looked ahead. It was a sea of people, all squeezing forward. The back was much less crowded. I found a place to sit and happened to receive a call from Ethan. Ethan had just left the hospital and told me he was driving over, but he'd heard there was a traffic jam, so it would probably be a while before he arrived. After I hung up, I waited listlessly at the edge of the crowd for the performance to start. Julian's band was scheduled to perform first. When the sky darkened, and I heard the surrounding chatter stop and turn into screams and cheers, I knew they were taking the stage. From my position, I couldn't even see the stage very well, but the sound of the music could transcend all the noise and reach my ears. Julian's singing was still so beautiful. Under the dazzling lights, he seemed to be forever that sharp, uninhibited teenager from the beginning. I heard him sing the first song the band had created in their early days. Back then, he sang freely on the campus field, and I was hooked. At first sight. Now, the song seemed to have been modified, with some changes to the lyrics and melody. It was more beautiful, more mature. Julian sang 5 songs before Ethan messaged me. The traffic was really bad, and he'd just arrived nearby. After I replied, telling Ethan to be careful, Julian and his band had already left the stage. I took a photo and sent it to Quinn, telling him I'd come. Quinn told me to wait a bit longer, saying that Julian was looking for me. I took a deep breath, silently repeating to myself that some things needed to be said. I shared my location with him. I found a spot further away from the stage, where there was almost no one, and waited for Julian. Julian had already changed out of his stage clothes. In his casual clothes, he looked fresh and simple. Congratulations, I congratulated Julian. The performance was a success. Did you hear the songs I sang? Julian's breathing was a little rapid. He glanced at the crowd behind him and said, I sang the song that introduced us. It wasn't just me. Many people know you because of that song. It's because you're so talented. Olivia, that's not what I meant. Julian interrupted me hastily. When I chose that song, the person I thought of was you. Julian said he wanted to sing that song for me. Julian said he thought he liked girls like Chloe, but he later realized that without me, his life had become a mess. Julian also said that he liked me too, and wanted me to accept this confession that was almost 7 years late. As he spoke, Julian looked at me intently. The light from the street lamp cast 2 shadows on the ground. I'm sorry, I said, unconsciously clenching my hands and taking half a step back. I have a boyfriend. I love him very much. That doctor? Olivia, are you still trying to lie to me? I already asked. His colleague said he's not in a relationship at all. You're just his patient. Julian took a step forward, his tone full of certainty. He knew it was a lie, so he'd specifically emphasized that I should bring my boyfriend along to test me. Yes, I did lie to you before, but I'm not lying now. I really am with him, I said, meeting Julian's gaze. He pressed, but I wouldn't back down. And even if I were single, does your confession mean I have to accept it? Julian was taken aback by my words. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. We were silent for a moment, then Julian continued. I thought that after all this time, we liked each other, that we'd be together. Why be together? I couldn't help but let out a small, bitter laugh. Julian, you actually know that I used to like you, right? But do you really like me? Do you remember what I like to eat, what I like to do? Julian mumbled a few vague answers and then fell silent. He knew very well about his feelings for me, but he'd never responded. He was so certain that I'd always be there for him until Ethan's appearance threw him off balance. That was the best answer. All these years, I've secretly liked you. I knew you liked thin girls, so I dieted, controlled my weight. I knew you liked music, so I talked to you about music, about your dreams. I've always tried to conform to your preferences, but I couldn't completely abandon myself. I'm a very ordinary person. I can't give up my job, give up my ordinary life, to completely transform myself into the person you like, just to follow in your footsteps. So, I hid my feelings. You just said you've fallen for me, but Julian, you just want someone to always have your back, someone who will always listen to you. You don't like the real Olivia, you like the Olivia who's been chasing after you. I said everything in one breath. It had taken me a long time to understand these things, but fortunately, it wasn't too late. Julian's face looked pale and dejected under the lamplight. We were only a step apart, but it felt like we were separated by many years. Do you really like that doctor? Julian asked, almost whispering. Yes, I replied firmly. The real Olivia, freed from that mold, truly loved Ethan. Without warning, Julian let out a wry laugh and pointed behind me. I followed his finger and looked back. Ethan was standing under a street lamp not far away, wearing a windbreaker. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I felt like, the moment I turned around, he was smiling at me. So, I couldn't help but smile too. My boyfriend is waiting for me. I should go. I turned back, intending to say goodbye. I'm sorry, Julian said, standing in place, most of his figure hidden in the shadows. I didn't know what he was apologizing for, perhaps for this abrupt confession, or perhaps for the time wasted in the past. Don't be sorry. I'm happy to have a friend as excellent as you. I waved goodbye to Julian, feeling relieved, and ran towards Ethan. Ethan was still standing there. Seeing me run towards him, he opened his arms and embraced me. When did you get here? Why didn't you say anything? I looked up at him. I've been here for a while. I saw you two there, so I didn't want to interrupt, Ethan said, wrapping me in his windbreaker, like wrapping a dumpling. So you were spying. Is it spying if I'm looking at my own girlfriend? I stared at Ethan's face, silent, motionless. Ethan became a little uncomfortable under my gaze, twisting his neck slightly and asking me what was wrong. Were you jealous? Ethan's face stiffened. He didn't answer. You were jealous, weren't you? Ethan remained stiff, or perhaps he was forced to admit it. Okay, I was a little jealous. After all, that was Julian. I raised an eyebrow and Ethan continued, jealousy aside, I still trust you. You're right to trust me, I said, raising my chin. Nothing happened, and now I'm going to announce to the world that we're together. I took out my phone and quickly posted a photo of Ethan and me, announcing that this was my boyfriend. Ethan and I rarely posted on social media, sometimes going a year or two without a single update, because neither of us felt the need to make official announcements. That's why this big misunderstanding had happened. Ethan also took out his phone and showed it to me. It's almost out of battery. I'll post it after I charge it in the car. Are we leaving now? I asked, seeing the notification that my post had been successfully uploaded. I casually put my phone in Ethan's pocket. Yes! Where are we going? Since I'm still jealous. Ethan took my hand, leading me towards the exit. Tonight, I'm punishing you by making you take me to that dessert shop, to eat that delicious cake. Behind us were the bright lights and the bustling crowd. In the cool evening breeze, I linked my arm with Ethan's, and we walked out, stepping on our shadows. What if the dessert shop is closed? Then we'll go eat barbecue. How about we just go eat barbecue? Good idea.